We have the benefit of some great foresight by our utility ancestors. About 40% of our power comes from our own owned hydro resources. So we provide clean, renewable, carbon-free power. And to offset fossil fuels in transportation is a tremendous win. And we want to provide them the fuel that they can be proud of and they can rely on for those electric vehicles.
Welcome back to DAM, the official podcast of Northwest Hydropower. I'm your host, Austin Rohr, and I manage all things communications here at Northwest River Partners. Today, we're going to be talking all things transportation, electrification, and the role that clean energy and hydropower has in making that possible. Of course, I'm not the subject matter expert on any of that, so to cover the topic, we're speaking with our friend Cam from Tacoma Power, who is the manager of energy research and development, to give us the rundown on how all this is going to work. So, Cam, welcome to DAM.
Thank you, Austin. It's great to be here. I'm really excited.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I didn't want to butcher any of this in the intro. So, before we jump into the actual podcast, how do you properly pronounce your last name?
Yeah, that's not an easy one, so I'll be happy to say that. My name is Cam LeHouillier, and as you mentioned, I'm the manager of energy research and development at Tacoma Power.
Now, you may or may not know this. I actually have quite the history with Tacoma Power. I went to school at TCC, moved over to UW Tacoma to finish up my degree in communications. And while I was there, I did a 10-week internship with Tacoma Power. So my comms and utility start all kind of comes from that Tacoma area there.
That's terrific. Yeah, we actually have a pretty good relationship with Tacoma Community College. They have an engineering professor there, Professor Slager. Maybe you know her. And a couple of years ago, she decided that she wanted to take a sabbatical. And so for about 8 to 10 months, she reached out to us and we agreed to hire her for that 8 to 10 month period. And she came over and she learned a lot about the utility business and the energy industry. And we were very fortunate to have her collaboration and her insight. And yeah, it was a terrific partnership. I know the program pretty well. I've spoken at some of the classes there, and great young engineers that are getting their start there, and really excited that if we could see more of them apply for positions at Tacoma Power.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be fantastic. And I can vouch for it. It's a great place, and it's crazy to drive by now. I haven't been, part of the school side of that in at least 10 years now. But it's just changed so much. It's really built up, and the area around it's really come together, and it's a pretty cool deal. Are you a Tacoma native, or how long have you been over there?
No, I'm not. I've been working for Tacoma Power for 15 years, and so I understand and I know the community pretty well. But I've never lived in Tacoma. I live in Seattle.
Okay, okay. And so for those that, obviously you and I are both quite familiar with that area, but, our listeners might not be. Could you give us kind of a lay of the land there and set the scene for the service territory that we're talking about today?
Yeah, certainly. So Tacoma Power, we're a municipal public utility. We're a public utility that's owned by the city of Tacoma, but we serve a lot of communities in the South Sound region. Um, Many different little communities. And of course, we're the power provider for Joint Base Lewis McChord and also for the Port of Tacoma. And that's very important because, all of those aspects are looking to decarbonize their operations, and they're looking to do that with electricity. And of course, I should probably mention that Interstate 5, for those listeners who maybe aren't familiar, Interstate 5 is a main thoroughfare that goes from the north part of the state all the way down to the south part of the state where Portland is. It bisects our community and means that we have opportunities to provide electric vehicle charging for people who are even just passing through.
Certainly. And there's also, being familiar with the area, so much of an intersection there with Highway 16 coming in, and just to the north. I know it's a little outside of the service area, but obviously you have also everyone coming in from over Snoqualmie Pass. So there's a I know both from just the lay of the land and also the traffic experience that there's quite a bit going on there as far as transportation goes.
It's true. It's true. We are a transportation hub by all means. And Austin, it's getting a little better. The traffic is actually getting a little better there now.
The fact that that whole sort of section around the Tacoma Dome is finally seemed like it maybe wrapped up is it's very encouraging.
I'm excited about it.
So, as far as what energy research and development looks like for you, I mean, what else falls under the purview of that outside of just the EVs that we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I take a lot of responsibility for what my group does because I kind of made up the job. I was, I've worn a few different hats in my 25-year utility career, and so after having been the energy risk manager and then doing long-term resource planning, I decided that what we were seeing in the policy area and what we were seeing in the technology area pointed to a wave of electrification that was going to come to the utility sometime within this decade. And it was going to be a challenge to the way that we ran our business and the way we served our customers. So I started to get very interested in transportation electrification and also looking at different types of generating resource and also these ideas around grid modernization and how we act with our customers instead of just supplying them with power. I think that the utility of the future, may have to have more of a bi-directional relationship with customers. So after looking at all of these impending changes and these technological developments, I decided that I needed to pitch this as a separate group within our power management division. And so people saw the relevance of that and they saw that how important that was. So I started working exclusively on sort of a wide variety of topics. Pretty much the way I define my role is if it's something that the utility isn't really working on now, but will need to, or if it's a customer service offering that we don't have now, but we need to develop, then it's something that I'm interested in doing. It's a bit of a different strategy. Oftentimes, they'll give a subject matter expert the role of not only doing their regular day job, but also coming up with how it's supposed to be done in 5 or 10 years. And that's a really challenging thing to do to somebody, not just think about how to do their job now and how to do it efficiently and productively, but also think about the next thing. So to some degree, my team has taken on some of that responsibility, at least initially, to to examine what's happening, to get with partners outside of our utility, either national labs or industry trade associations, or interacting with startups and new developers, and then working out what is this? How does this work? How could we use this as a utility? And then the important part is then connecting back to those subject matter experts in whatever field it is. If it's energy efficiency, or if it's transmission and distribution planning, or if it's generation, working with those groups to collectively or together to figure out the details on it and how we could potentially use that.
And I imagine it is fairly dynamic, as you mentioned. You have JBLM, you have all that transportation coming through the area. There's downtown Tacoma, the city itself, as well as kind of a vast suburb. And I would argue even still today, that depending on where you are in the area, you can run across something that feels maybe even more rural out there. So there is a really wide range of different needs to be met just within that what boundaries you would consider Tacoma.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we do have a variety of different types of customers. We don't have any irrigators, as far as I know. When I've worked at other utilities, there have been there've been irrigators, which is a completely different type of customer. We don't have any of those, but we do have, of course, large industrial customers. We have terminal operators at the Port of Tacoma, and we have a transit agency, of course, that wants help and is seeking ways to decarbonize their operations. City operations, yeah, there's a wide variety of customers out there, residential, commercial, and industrial, and it's our responsibility to help them.
And I think that that really plays into my next question for you, which is, from Tacoma's standpoint, and really from any utility's standpoint in the current day and age, why is there this sense of needing to take on that responsibility of creating an easier path towards EV adoption?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's important. There's large consensus that carbon emissions from fossil fuel use has many externalities. Climate change is one of them, but localized emissions, particulate matter from diesel engines, nitrous oxides, sulfur dioxides, those impact the communities. And electric vehicles don't have those same issues. Many people are seeking to decarbonize or to clean the air quality up, and we serve our customers with renewable carbon-free electric power. And depending on how you calculate that or how you quantify that, we generate more than 100% of our power. We're a surplus utility. We create more power than we need ourselves, and so we end up selling quite a bit into the wholesale market. But if you look at our customers' use, we're about 98% carbon-free, and that small sliver of carbon is sourced from our purchases and sales in a wholesale market. We don't always know exactly where our power came from because we can't tag the individual electrons. But because we have this fantastic asset, this hydropower asset, we help balance the region because the electric grid, of course, has to be balanced at all times, all hours of the day, every day of the year. And by turning those dams on and off, by adjusting the flow levels, we're able to help integrate renewable energy coming into the system and how it's being used. And so with that, we end up buying power at sometimes and selling power at times. And so when we buy power, we inadvertently take in some small amounts of carbon, and that's all assessed to us by the Department of Ecology. They figure that part out based on averages, really. So we provide clean, renewable, carbon-free power. And to offset fossil fuels in transportation is a tremendous win. It's a win in many different ways. So we're excited that some of our customers have chosen to go that route, and we want to provide them the fuel that they can be proud of and they can rely on for those electric vehicles.
And it's an important point to mention that energy mix and the 98% number, because some people would really argue that an EV is only as clean as the energy you're able to charge it with. And I even see, like, when I was doing some research today for the podcast, that Tacoma itself describes its power source as clean and renewable, thanks in part to hydro, in describing the EV efforts that you guys are making. Could you elaborate a little bit on the value of hydropower as it relates to electrifying transportation specifically?
I think that it's pretty well accepted now that battery electric vehicles work really well for most people in most situations. So, if you have a commute that's 30, 40, 50 miles a day or less, an electric vehicle will be just perfect for you. And the cost of the power that you get to enjoy, at least in this part of the country, in the Pacific Northwest, our residential rate is about 9 cents a kilowatt hour, which is pretty low when you look across the country. And it's some of the cleanest power also. So it's some of the cleanest and cheapest power in the country. And on an equivalent basis to what you would pay in gasoline, with all the taxes and everything included, you're paying about 25% for the power that you would otherwise be paying for with gasoline. And so that's great. It's cheaper. Electric vehicles, because they have less moving parts, means they have less maintenance. And for most people, that's a tremendous thing. They're fantastic. They're fun to drive because they have such great torque at low RPMs. Well, there's no RPM, so it's all torque, and it's fantastic. It's fun to drive, and it's you can feel good about it because your power going into it is less expensive and it's cleaner. And in those parts of the country where there's still quite a lot of natural gas or coal power going into the EVs, those EVs are still operating from an energy efficiency standpoint. They're more efficient than gasoline engines are because so much of the energy that's in gasoline gets sent out as waste heat, essentially. And so, yeah, it's from my standpoint, it's just a superior technology for light duty vehicles. When it gets to medium and heavy duty vehicles, there are some challenges. Battery electric trucks, um, they don't work exactly the same way as diesel trucks do. There is a trade-off between the weight of the batteries and the range that you can go in those trucks. So, some of the early demonstration projects were for semi trucks that are carrying potato chips. Well, we all know potato chips are kind of light. It's not the same as, carrying rolled steel or timber or something like that. And so I think many of the truck manufacturers out there, they're working on batteries and battery electric trucks, and they're making them better, but they're not stopping there. Many of them are also working on hydrogen electric vehicles, hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles, which offers greater range with less weight. And so we also, as a utility, we're very interested also in the production and use of green electrolytic hydrogen, which is hydrogen that's made exclusively from clean renewable power through an electrolyzer. We think that this is important, particularly for medium and heavy duty transportation, just because of that range component and the power component that's needed to move goods and services, goods, not services, long distances. That's going to be important. Of course, we serve the Port of Tacoma, and we're looking for opportunities there where we can do a drayage demonstration project that includes both battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles. So, very excited about the potential for that as well.
Certainly, and I need to make sure to remember. I do have a question that came to mind. I'd like to ask you about some heavier duty use potentially for the area. But before we get there, what is the source for Tacoma when it comes to that clean, renewable hydropower? Because as I recall, and the little bit of research that I did leading up, you guys are also, I believe, hydropower owners, not just, purchasers of hydro. And, you brought up the tallying up of individual electrons. Sometimes I think people maybe get this idea in their head that, oh, I get to select what energy comes down the transmission line. And that's not necessarily how it works, but I do know that you guys have a portion of hydropower that actually belongs to the utility.
Yeah, that's right. We have the benefit of some great foresight by our kind of utility ancestors, I guess, where they went out and they made investments in local hydropower projects. So Tacoma Power receives about 60% of its power from Bonneville Power Administration. We're a preference customer right along with other municipal public utilities in the state. And about 40% of our power comes from our owned hydro resources. And the projects are Cushman project, that's out on the peninsula just up Highway 16. The Cowlitz River project and the Nisqually River project. We have another project, which is the Winoochee project. It's a bit smaller, but those first three that I mentioned are the much larger cascading hydroelectric projects. So they have a larger reservoir and a dam, and then a smaller regulation pond smaller lake, and then another dam. And with that, it provides us clean, renewable power we can count on. Um, and it gives us the flexibility to, increase or decrease our power generation at a variety of times. Of course, along with that comes the responsibility of running the river responsibly and meeting many um, overlapping and important goals simultaneously, which is, we have to manage for flood control to make sure that the downstream river doesn't do any damage to people or the environment. We keep the reservoir elevations at certain levels for recreation in the summertime because you know what? People like boating and fishing and enjoying the water. We like to, we manage the parks that are at those projects, provide a lot of recreation and great use for the community and for the area. Of course, we regulate those parks. We regulate those projects for electricity production and also for fish passage because we've developed fish hatcheries on many of those projects, and to assist with restocking the fish that live in those rivers and giving them good habitat to thrive in. And we're very proud of the work that we've done to set up those fish hatcheries and those the equipment that transfers the fish above and below the dam. And we're real excited about how those stocks are doing well. They're doing very well at those projects, and so we're really pleased with the effect that we've had to support salmon populations, particularly, but not just salmon populations. So that's our mix of hydropower at Tacoma Power. There's another resource that we don't often talk about, which is also really important, and that's energy efficiency. We've been running energy efficiency programs for many, many years, decades. And, people ask, what's something that I could do to prepare myself for this, changing energy future? And just making your home more efficient, no matter what fuel you're using, just making it more efficient is going to be a great way to save energy and save yourself some money. And we have a lot of programs to help people with that. And so, if people are interested in that, they should go to our website and check it out, as well as transportation electrification programs. We have programs to help people get EV chargers in their homes or to get connected, whether they live at a single family residence or whether they're renting or whether they live in a multifamily residence. We have programs that can help people with that.
I will say, especially when it comes to those programs, one thing that I'll always remember, and I don't remember the details maybe as well as I would like to, but when I started my internship, the very first week I was there, first day I came in, a bunch of people came in and they were exhausted because they had just spent all weekend renovating a house for somebody in the area, in the community. And not only did this person need their house, they were disabled, they needed a lot of help getting things cleaned up and also making it more accessible to them to manage their disability, but also doing all of the upgrades to like a ductless heat pump and an efficient water heater, and doing weather stripping and everything that it took to get that person's home efficient. So I can attest to the fact that Tacoma has really gone above and beyond on more than one occasion to make sure that people are having their needs met in that way.
I think what you're talking about is as a utility, we've worked with Habitat for Humanity to help out with individuals in our community who just don't have the wherewithal or the resources or the ability to make meaningful change in their lives. And I'm really proud of the utility and their efforts to do that, to reach out to the community and to make a positive impact in the community. So yeah, that's nice of you to mention. I appreciate that, Austin. That's something that I know is it's a real positive event in the utility because we as coworkers, we see each other and we work together all the time, but in an effort, going out and working together in a different way in a different location to help somebody out like that is boy, it's really impactful. It really helps the team kind of come together as well, and a lot of great friendships have been built doing projects just like that. One other thing, we talked a little bit about energy efficiency just now. There's a program that we started in our team, and has been sort of transferred over to our energy efficiency group, and that's a shade tree program. And the idea there is that, of course, the city of Tacoma has, in comparison with many other cities, sort of a low level of tree canopy as a percentage. And so the city has a program of putting trees, providing coupons for trees. And we were able to come in and to make a couple of adjustments to that program and suggest that customers plant a tree that can provide shade on the south or southwest side of their home, so that it's going to, provide their home with shade during the summertime. And the idea is that, as the climate is affected and as we see more and more heat, heat dome effects or hot days in the summertime, shade trees can provide quite a bit of cooling, not just to the building that they're planted outside of, but to the overall, what they call the heat island effect. So the concrete that gets heated up by the sun, if you provide a little bit of shade with shade trees, that can really reduce that localized heat in that area. And so we piggybacked on in partnership with the city, we piggybacked on that, and we provided an additional incentive. And so we've seen tree adoptions through that program really skyrocket, and it's really exciting to see. And customers love the program. They're really excited to get even more of a discount on trees that are available in their neighborhood from local businesses, and they take care of those trees, and they love the fact that that their utility is sort of thinking not just about poles and wires, but how can we make the customer's life experience better? That was a rewarding program for us as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot, if you're a member of the Tacoma community and if you're in a TPU service territory, you're in a pretty good place. Speaking of programs, as far as the EV adoption side of things go, what has the utility specifically been working towards in terms of kind of creating that pathway for folks to start making that transition into an EV?
So a few years ago, the utility's ability to influence or to provide funding for EV programs in the state of Washington was a little bit uncertain. Taking a look at the state constitution, utilities, we have an obligation to provide energy efficiency funding in the Constitution, and there's an exception from something called the gift of public funds prohibition. So we cannot, as a utility and as a business, be going out and spending money in a way that is donative. So the question is, okay, well, how can the utility support transportation electrification programs? And looking at some of the case law around it, it seemed like, it was not going to be an easy thing for the utility to go out and support, given the legal situation. So us and a few other utilities got together, and we saw this as definitely something that the utility should be involved with. And so we helped to craft some legislation that was eventually known as Senate Bill 1512. And it was an amendment that provided guidance from the state legislature that allowed utilities to get involved in transportation electrification. And so that passed a few years ago. And one of the stipulations is a transportation electrification plan, that each utility engage in that. And of course, we still have to go out and make sure that our programs are non-donative. Like we have to be in compliance with that gift of public funds rule. And so we have to do what's called a ratepayer impact measure test. It's a utility cost test that makes sure that what we're doing is in the benefits of the ratepayer at large, not just the ratepayer who's applying for the program. We don't want to subsidize the applicant, with funds that are all coming from the non-applicant. This has to be something that can stand on its own. So we're really excited. We've been doing a lot to help with transportation electrification. After that bill was put forth, we put out a transportation strategic plan, and so we've been doing things like initially a lot of ride and drive events, which was we would go out to local car dealers and we would get them to show up at a place and time, and we'd advertise it, and we'd get the public to show up who had never seen an electric vehicle before. They'd never sat in one. They'd never ridden one. They didn't know what it was like. They didn't experience it. And some of the research that has come out of the University of California, Davis, they've said things like if you get a person to sit in a car, they're 30% more likely to buy one the next time because they recognize just how cool and fun and interesting and exciting it could be to drive an electric car. So by providing some, outreach opportunities and some education and informing our customers about just how low cost our power is and how clean it is, it really helped people, I think, understand that this is something that could work in their lives. Early on, because we couldn't provide a bunch of funding up front, we did a thing where we negotiated with some of the car dealers and we said, we would like you to give a voluntary discount on electric vehicles. If you show up to this event, maybe you could give um, some of our customers a deal. And they agreed to that. They're always looking for sales and, they're trying to grow this business also. So we did that, and that was a fun and engaging experience. I think to a large degree, the public has moved on past that. We had a lot of very basic, EV 101 type information on our website, and we're in the process of changing that out. I think that the consumer is much more educated about electric vehicles now, and they're looking for more information about other types of questions that they have. Like they have a lot of questions about, will the grid be sufficient to handle all of these electric vehicles that are definitely going to be coming? And we have good answers for that, I think. I think we have knowledgeable, researched answers on that. We can speak to that point. And so, maybe I'll jump to that and then I'll jump back to what else are we doing to support electric vehicles. I'm kind of all over the place today. So in a nutshell, I'm not really that worried about can the grid handle electric vehicles. Definitely over the next 5 to 7 years, I don't see an issue in terms of either generation or transmission or distribution in handling electric vehicle adoption. It's going to be a process that's going to take, 10 to 20 years, but it is coming. And I think that there are going to be certain circumstances where utility upgrades are going to be necessary and needed, particularly where you see big fleets of trucks and things like that move over to become electrified. We're starting to see that a little bit with school buses because school buses there's a lot of grant funding out there for school buses. And so we're seeing a number of school buses being electrified. And this is giving us a fantastic opportunity to learn about that and to prepare for the future. I think personally that because most people don't drive more than 40 or 50 miles in a day, that much of that EV charging can happen late at night or early in the morning. And so because of that, what we don't want people to do is get home from work at 5 or 6 o'clock and then plug in their EV and start it charging, because that's when we start with what we call our coincident peak load. And that's what's going to trigger a need for a distribution upgrade is if we start having a bunch of EV load, charging that happens over our coincident peak load. Instead, what we want to do is move towards a managed charging system where we incentivize customers to plug in when they get home, but have the car schedule its charging to much later in the evening or early in the morning. And they'll still be able to get a full charge, especially if they're on level 2. But so I think that's going to mitigate a lot of the issue with make sure our distribution system has enough capacity. So that leads me into one of the programs that we have. We have a home EV charging program, which offers between $400 and $600 per applicant to get level 2 EV charging at their home. And that's in anticipation of a managed charging program coming sometime in the near future. We're not quite there yet. We're still pretty busy with our AMI rollout, or automatic meter infrastructure rollout, which is going to be kind of necessary for to do a managed charging program. But yeah, under that home EV charging program, you can get an EV charger if you don't have one that you like now. You can get a rebate for that on your bill, Or you could get funding for something called a smart splitter. A smart splitter essentially takes an existing 240 volt outlet or 240 volt service from your panel and allows it to be used for two things simultaneously. It designates one thing as primary and another thing as secondary. So if you have a water heater or if you have a clothes dryer or you have something that uses 240 volt, that can be designated your primary. And then your EV can be designated secondary. And so that whenever your water heater comes on, your EV charger would turn off. But your water heater doesn't come on for all night long. It comes on for a brief period of time and then it turns off and then it turns on again and then it turns off again. And so you'd still be able to use both using the same circuit, which might mitigate a panel upgrade, which can be a little bit more costly. And especially if you're a renter, you don't necessarily want to upgrade the electrical system in your landlord's house. So those are a couple of things that you can get. And I believe there's some other benefits to that program as well. Oh, and if you want to put in a 240 volt outlet from your panel, we'll also help you pay for that. And if you need more than one of those, we'll give you $600 to do that. And the idea is to get people, as I said, on level 2 charging. So that's some of the stuff that we're doing for home EV charging. We're, of course, also, like many other utilities, investing in public charging. We have a program where we're funding private companies who want to put charging at their business for their customers or their employees. We're providing funding for that. We're also providing funding for multifamily property owners so that they could put EV charging for the benefit of their residents or visitors. It's very difficult if you're renting in an apartment building and you don't have a designated place to park and charge your car. I mean, getting infrastructure put in place would be very challenging for a renter. So the idea is that the utility can come in and we've sourced external funds for a lot of our programs. And so we're able to pay out very, I would say, generous incentives towards that. We'll pay between 80 and 100% of the cost for charging at your multifamily residence in our current program. It's limited time only. And and so we're really excited about that. And also we've rolled out EV charging in the right of way connected to city streetlights. We were able to do an LED program for our city streetlights and get away from high pressure sodium lights. And that left quite a bit of capacity on some of our city streetlights networks. And so now we're connecting level 2 charging there in each of our business districts and in the communities around. And so that, even if, if you like to frequent a particular area and go for dinner or go visit the farmer's market or something, hopefully very soon you'll have an EV charger sitting there waiting for you that you can plug into and take advantage of that. So we have a lot of great things happening to support EV charging, and looking to do more.
I would imagine there's at least a fair amount of research and development involved in doing all this as well. How did you go about testing out and deciding on the approach to all of these different charging infrastructures and programs? I mean, was this through the collaborations that you mentioned with maybe some of those laboratories and different folks, or looking at maybe what other utilities have done, or was it in-house? Or I'm sure there's a combination of many things, but maybe you could give us some insight into how you come to these decisions and find these ways to implement all of this.
My answer might be a little different from some of my counterparts at other utilities. So I think once you accept the idea that transportation electrification is going to come quickly and it's going to be pervasive, it's going to be everywhere. You then, at least for me, it becomes pretty apparent that we need to get EV charging out there and we need to get it in our community. So what I've been focusing on is looking for opportunities, being very opportunistic about it and not getting too hung up on, do we have exactly the right place? Do we have exactly the right equipment? Do we have exactly the right counterparty or customer or, equipment or whatever? Instead, I've been very focused on affordability. In our community, there are a lot of people who, any type of a rate increase is a hardship. And so we're very focused on that. So one thing that we've done is we've been very opportunistic about going out and finding partners who can share in the costs and share the benefits, and going out and getting external funding. And so I'm really quite pleased with our ability to do that. Our program funding has been about 25% ratepayer funded, which is really low. We're mostly going out and getting other people to spend money, and we're using other people's money for that. And that is really exciting to me because I think anybody can go out and spend money and get stuff done. It's more exciting and it's more fulfilling for me to know that I'm providing benefits to our customers, our ratepayers, that they didn't have to pay full freight for, and that's pretty cool. So I've been a little bit more action oriented, and let's just get the stuff out there because it's all going to be useful and it's all going to be needed, and it's you know in some cases, we found chargers that were installed very early and were no longer supported. They were orphans sitting out there, and all they were doing was frustrating EV drivers who would drive up to it, see a charger, drive up to it, and they would find that the network wasn't connected or it was broken or something like that. And so in some cases, we've adopted these orphans and we've just reinvested. And that's a small cost to put a new charger on a place where the power has already been provided. So we've done that in some cases, and so I try not to outthink myself. Like um, I don't get too hung up on the pins on a map game. Some I've encountered it a few times where people want to spend a bunch of time thinking about, okay, what's the societally optimal sort of distribution of EV charging assets? Most of the time, when you're putting EV charging out there, you need a place, you need money, you need some site host who's willing to do this. You have to think about how useful this is going to be, how used and useful this is going to be. And so we really try hard to focus on those elements, bringing those elements together, and not taking sort of kind of a societal view of where is the best place to put EV charging. And I focus more on just trying to get them out there. There's one exception to that is we've been very focused at making sure that our investments in transportation electrification go into all of our communities. And so we're very focused, of course, in providing EV charging, even in areas where we're not seeing a lot of EV adoption in lower income or lower opportunity areas. We also want to put EV charging there because our thinking is because EV charging or EV vehicles, electric vehicles, are low cost and because they're inexpensive to operate and they do a great job, this is going to be very important, I think, for people who, you know, maybe they can't afford to have a vehicle otherwise. I think that this is a great way to do that. And so one of the programs that we've been working with partners is on an EV car share program. So where we put in charging in some parts of our community, and a partner brings in electric vehicles and insurance, and they will allow that vehicle to be hired out by the hour by members who are part of this nonprofit co-op. And so there's two locations in Tacoma that are just getting spun up, and they should be like all 100% ready to go, I think next quarter. And so we're really excited about that because we'll be giving, folks who maybe don't have the facility to own their own car, the ability to take an EV out for $5 an hour, including the charging. And then that unlocks a certain amount of freedom for them and gives them capabilities that they didn't have before. And I'm really excited about that program because benefits of EV charging and transportation electrification should be available to everybody.
Well, and that brings up a big question that I think some other utilities out there might be pondering right now, as well as people in the general public that are paying really close attention to this. Is what the potential role of a utility is here in transportation, and there's questions about, is this a good business model? I know, and you do as well, a public utility not being really a business in the sense of corporation, but at the end of the day, the books still need to be balanced out. You can't just go spending money left and right. Things have to be funded and paid for, and all that. So, you know, I think there's an interesting question people are trying to figure out, which is, do we just sell the electricity? Should we be the owners and operators of the charging infrastructure? Like, where's the line drawn? And from what we're talking about, it seems like the approach you're taking is, hey, we're going to do a little bit of everything and try and find every possible avenue that it can benefit the community there.
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. What the utility role is, shouldn't just be left up to chance or circumstance. I think it should be thought through quite carefully. So for us, we look at our customers and we say, well, what is it that our customers need and want? And many of them are adopting electric vehicles. And of course, they have charging at home, charging opportunities at home. And we're helping them with that, especially to get on that level 2, as we discussed. And 80% of that charging happens at home. So that's a great first place to start. But there's also, sometimes people visit from other locations and they won't be close enough to their home where they can rely on EV charging at home. And when they visit Tacoma, they're going to need charging here also. So we need to have a certain amount of public EV charging for visitors and for people who don't have a permanent and safe place to charge their car at home, multifamily residents, et cetera. And so we need to have some public EV charging. And in many cases, we've partnered with external companies who want to provide EV charging in our community. And especially for DC fast charging, level 3 charging, that stuff is pretty expensive. And so we're very happy to work with outside parties who want to put that in specific places. Now, big companies that provide EV charging, they're going to focus in certain parts of our community and they're not going to be interested in other parts of our community. And so we'll work with them where we can and where they want to. We're happy to do that. But when it comes to making sure that all of the areas of our community are covered, that's probably going to require some utility infrastructure or some city infrastructure. And we're definitely happy to help out with that as well. We always want to cooperate with somebody, whether that be the county government or the city government or or local metro parks or whoever, or even just like a private citizen who has a parking lot and a company and they want to provide charging as an amenity to their customers or their employees. We want to work with all of them, share the costs and make as much happen as possible. But in some cases, the utility is going to make an investment and we're going to put the charging there, but we're going to make sure it's low cost and we're going to get our money back. And we're excited about that. And now with the state's clean fuel program based on the clean fuel standard, the utility will be able to receive credits that we can turn into a market, turn into revenues, and help fund future transportation electrification, capital investments and expenses. And so we see this as, we can make careful investments in targeted areas to help out with that. And we're very excited. Very soon, we're going to roll out a fleet EV charging program so we can help fleets like school buses or like drayage or like forklift fleets, get to, and help them with electric vehicle charging at their facility or in their community, so that they can worry about the cost of the truck or the vehicle, and we'll help them with the charging. And I think that will be a win-win situation. We can make money on selling the power and getting some credits, and they can win by, not having to pay another upfront cost along with the truck cost. And so we're just putting some sort of finishing touches on that program, and we hope to have it out at the end of this year. So we're really excited about stuff like that.
And on the subject of fleets, does the utility utilize its own EVs?
Yes, we've had electric vehicles in our fleets for quite a while. Started out with pool cars, inspectors and things like that going out to do jobs. That's well within the capabilities of some of those early electric vehicles. I'm thinking of like the 2015, 2016 Nissan Leafs, et cetera. And we have started to expand that to look at some of the more vocational vehicles that we have. Like we're looking at bucket trucks, and we're looking at, of course, the pickup trucks that have come out in the last year or so, like the F-150 Lightning. We would love to have more of those, but they're constrained in sales because they're so popular. Everybody wants an F-150 Lightning, and the equivalent from the other automakers. So we're excited about integrating more and more of those into our fleet. A couple of things that are a particular, concern when we're talking about that is you always want to make sure that the vehicles are able to do their mission. And in some cases, when we need them to work is when there's a power outage. So, of course, we want to be very careful about how we do that and to make sure that we have charging infrastructure available, even if the power's out. And so we're looking at a variety of situations about how we could continue with that. And yeah, more to come. But we have a pretty sizable and growing electric fleet serving our customers both in Tacoma Power, Tacoma Water, Tacoma Rail. And yeah, Tacoma Rail's interested in going out and getting electric locomotives and to replace some of their diesel locomotives. So that's exciting as well.
And that does kind of bring me back to, luckily, I did remember the question I wanted to ask you about heavy duty usage. So, when you brought up JBLM, the ports, everything like that, it kind of clicked in my head. Like, what else is in Tacoma that I know that they would like to eventually electrify is at least one of the Washington State ferries. How does that look from the utility perspective? I mean, does that fall, partly at least on you guys to figure out some of the infrastructure that would go into that, or is the state kind of taking the lead on that, or what does that look like?
Yeah. Well, on the topic of electrification of sort of maritime vehicles in general, I'll talk a little bit about the Washington State ferries more specifically in a minute. So when it comes to maritime vessels, of course, you know, um, they run on diesel. Like many of the vehicles in the port area, they run on diesel, and that's a primary target for decarbonization and electrification. Well, of course, many of these vehicles are not going to run on batteries. They're just too big, and they just don't have the power output that's necessary at this time. Maybe sometime in the future, but we're not quite there yet. So one of the things that we've been working on, of course, is shore power, which is we connect ships that are at berth to system power to our electric grid, and then that way they don't have to run their auxiliary engines while they're at berth. That's a huge emitter of pollution in our communities, right in the heart of our communities, and oftentimes surrounded by communities, low opportunity communities, disadvantaged communities. And so addressing those is like very important to us. So we participated in a shore power project at the Port of Tacoma at the Husky terminal, and we're excited to be a participant in that. But we learned a lot about that project. That project is unfortunately it's a little over budget. It's still going forward, but the costs have gone up and up and up. And the reality of the situation with shore power is that you electrify a single berth. It takes a lot of equipment. You're talking about high capacity infrastructure and oftentimes substations that have to be built to support the tremendous power draw that those ships have, not just because they have some onboard systems, but a lot of times they're carrying refrigerated cargo. And each of those refrigerated cargo units have to be plugged into the ship electrical system. So that's between 4 and 6 megawatts, a lot of those container ships. If you're going to build those out at every berth in the Port of Tacoma, that's a lot of infrastructure. And the problem is that they only get used, 3 or 4 days a month on average, because the ship's not there. Most of the time, the ship's not there, and there's quite a bit of risk as well because the shipping business is very competitive, and ships that come to your port today may not come back there in 2 or 3 years. They might go somewhere else. And so then what do you do? Okay, well, so there's a problem from the utility perspective in recovering the costs that you invest for all this massive infrastructure and equipment. Like we said, we can't be donating money out there, and we can't be sinking money into investments that are stranded assets. So what are we going to do? Well, we've had the idea that maybe a more elegant solution would be to provide power to ships at berth via a mobile format, like a power barge. And that power barge could be disconnected from the grid. Maybe it's got hydrogen on it, and maybe it's got fuel cells on it, and it's providing power opportunistically around the port. So ship comes in here, it's getting power. When it leaves, the barge moves and goes somewhere else, and it's providing power the very next day. I think that's a better capital utilization of the equipment, and that could be lower cost, but we the elements exist. We just need to put them together in the right format. And I know that there's a number of other utilities and national labs and companies out there that are looking this, and we want to explore that idea more. So that's one great idea. There's a project right now to do a battery electric passenger ferry. They're calling it the Fast Foil Ferry. It's a joint innovation project with Washington Maritime Blue as kind of the lead. We're participating in it to learn about it and to understand it, because there is going to be a utility connection to electrified ferries. And so we've been helping out with that project, even though that project won't come to Tacoma, at least initially. We were really hoping that it would, but it looks like maybe a future one will, or maybe a hydrogen powered ferry will. There's hydrogen powered ferries is sort of a specialty in here in Washington State. All American Marine produced the first commercial hydrogen ferry. It's getting shipped down to San Francisco. It's there right now, called the Sea Change. It's really exciting. It could be the future of ferry transport in the Sound. So really excited about that. As far as Washington State ferries go, we don't actually have any Washington State ferries that visit our service area. We do have Pierce County ferries, but we don't have the big Washington State ferry boats coming here. And so, I think that there's a plan to electrify those ferries, but I think that the technology is moving quite rapidly, and it's not quite as easy as you might think to build out charging infrastructure that will provide the power necessary to recharge the batteries during those 10 to 15-minute layovers when they're boarding new passengers and passengers are leaving the ship. So I think there's some technical problems that still have to be worked out, but I'm excited that there's a concerted effort to decarbonize those ships, at least in part initially. And I'm excited to see where they go with that, because we definitely want to see something like that happen. And there may be applications that move to larger marine fleets in the future, because we are an important marine fleet, and the Port of Tacoma is an important economic engine for the whole community and for the region. And so making sure they can continue to do what they need to do, their mission, but to do it with emitting less carbon, I think that's a very valuable goal to go after. So I probably gave you more than you wanted to know on that topic.
No, you can never do that on this podcast. That's for sure. I think that I would always encourage our listeners to do lots of research. I think it's a great thing to do. But if people aren't going to go out and do that, I hope that I can provide a little bit of context, and that the Port of Tacoma is truly it's a big port, and the ships that are coming in there, when we're talking about this, we're talking about the sort of container ships that make ocean crossings frequently, and I'll save the full story for maybe another day, but I've actually been on the receiving end of some of the wake of those ships out there in the Sound, and you can make a fairly large boat feel pretty small pretty fast when those guys are coming through, especially at maybe a higher rate of speed than what the Coast Guard would advise them to travel at.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. One other thing on ports, because we're on the topic, I want to give a shout out to the Northwest Seaport Alliance and our friends over there at the Port of Tacoma and at the Port of Seattle. The Northwest Seaport Alliance, of course, operates both the port in Seattle and the Port of Tacoma together. And they've been just fantastic partners for decarbonization. We're doing a lot of great work with them. In the last year, we put out, we together worked on a project to get the first 6 electric yard tractors or terminal tractors electrified. And that was a very rewarding and informative experience. And so we're using that as part of the basis for our upcoming fleet electrification program. Um, Very pleased with that. We're working right now on a electric or zero emission drayage project, which we're very excited about because it looks like it might turn into a sort of a car share like program. Many people don't know this, but many of the drayage operators, the trucks that come in and pull the cargo containers off and take them to warehouses around the community, many of those drivers, come from immigrant communities. Something like 75 or 80% of the trucks operating, and many of these folks that are driving these trucks, they work a lot of long hours, and the pay can be actually quite minimal, and they don't have the wherewithal to go out and buy brand new electric trucks. So the program that we're working on currently with the Northwest Seaport Alliance and other partners, um, I don't want to say too much because things are still sort of a little bit in the works, but I'm excited about the possibility that we could make this so that the trucks are available, charged up, and available for people, uh, who are independent owner operators to make use of them and to try them out and you know, to get familiar with them and to feel comfortable with them, and then so that they can pursue opportunities to get additional funding and to actually own and operate these trucks.
Well, and I appreciate whether it's that or earlier you sharing all this information because I think that when people envision EVs, when you use electric vehicles or EV in conversation, the first thought is like, oh, a Tesla, oh, a F-150 Lightning, right? Like they're just really thinking about the car that they might drive or they might see on the road. But this really does expand to so many different aspects of the transportation needs that are, you know, happening on a daily basis to make our lives work and function the way that they do. I mean, getting goods on and off of those ships or getting a bucket truck out there to repair a line. I mean, there's vehicles being used in so many different capacities in our everyday lives.
Yeah, on that point again, Austin, EVs are important and we're excited to see them in our communities, where individuals have decided that that's going to work for them. We're excited about that. But we're also to some degree moving past that, and we're looking at the places where it might be more challenging or might be more difficult or might be more important that we provide some leadership or some guidance or some research. So one of the things that we're working on right now is we're working with a high school in our service territory, Franklin Pierce High School. They got the first electric school bus in the state. We're very excited about that. And they're going after funding to get more and more. And so this really opens the question for us as a utility. How are we going to supply the power that's going to be needed to fuel 60 electric school buses at that site? That's not an inconsequential amount of power. That's a lot of power. And that grid at that place in that location and their electrical system at that school is not prepared for that. So how do we do this efficiently, and how do we come up with a blueprint so that we can do this many times over at all the other schools in our community, not just for us, but in our neighboring utilities and in the state and even on the West Coast. So we're engaged in a microgrid project where we're examining, well, how can the utility provide power to these buses? And then once you have 60 school buses, each one with 125 or 150 kilowatt hour battery on board, and they're not going to be going anywhere in the months of July and August. Can this act as a grid resource in some way? Can we use this in a different way so that it provides benefit for the community? And can we use this as a way to support operations at the school, even if the power goes out? Can they open themselves up to be a shelter in case of a disaster or in case of smoke events? many schools in the last couple of years with the COVID crisis have made big investments in their air filtration systems. And so, there's a lot of people in the community that surround the schools that maybe don't have air conditioning in this part of the country. And so when there's heat events or if there's a smoke day, we're getting a lot more wildfires out here in the West, and there's some days where the smoke is quite bad and the air quality is very low. Is there a place where these communities can go to and shelter, or to get out of harm's way if they have some sort of respiratory disease? And can they do it even if the power's out? And so we're excited to be working with the community there and many partners. This is a State Department of Commerce funded study. And so we will be producing a report on that we'll share widely. And we hope that this will help us understand better about how this could be both an opportunity and also, we have work to do to make sure that we're preparing for systems that could support this kind of adoption at these schools.
So, speaking quite broadly, where do we go from here? And what challenges do we need to be addressing for EV adoption to be possible on sort of a broad scale? I mean, I know we've talked a lot about Tacoma's specific efforts and challenges, but just as a whole, what do you see as kind of the key things that we need to be looking at moving forward?
I think that electric vehicles I think their development has gone well recently, but there are challenges that will have to be overcome. Um, I think that we're not at the end point of battery technology. I think that there are a lot of different companies, there are a lot of innovative people who are working on different types of battery chemistry that use more earth abundant materials rather than rare earth minerals. And I think we will do more. This isn't quite my industry. This is more in the industry, for the automakers. But I think there's going to be more of a focus on domestic production of some of those minerals and the electrical components that go into the vehicles for strategic reasons, and also to be clear and to be sure that where we're sourcing the equipment and the minerals and the materials is ethically done. I think that's important, and I think we should support those efforts within that industry. And I think that as a utility, we care about charging and discharging, and so we want to encourage customers to use managed charging in order to help us defer investments in the distribution system. I think we're going to have to, probably, with the way we're changing the grid right now, where we're disinvesting in fossil fuels, not us, Tacoma personally, but in the region at large. I think that more intermittent renewable generation from wind and solar is going to come online, and we're going to have to figure out how can we effectively integrate that energy and connect it to customers in a way that still upholds reliability and safety. And so I think there is a role for green electrolytic hydrogen to take on those over generation events and to turn that energy into a storable form, and then to be able to turn it back into energy to meet peak demand periods. And so I think a lot of research has to go into hydrogen and exactly how hydrogen can be stored. Gaseous hydrogen is great, but it's very difficult to store and it's very difficult to move. So I think it's important for the industry to look at liquid hydrogen carriers. We're working with a Washington State startup that uses Formic as a liquid hydrogen carrier. It's energy dense, and part of the reason we like it is because it's very benign. It's non-explosive, non-flammable. It does not contaminate the ground if it's spilled on the ground or in the water or something. It just decomposes back into oxygen and hydrogen and water. So I think there's a lot of research that needs to be done there so that we can help support integrate more renewable energy on the grid and still be able to meet the demands of our customers. And so there's a lot to do there. Utility scale batteries, I think a lot more development has to be done there. Um, right now, it's not sufficient for our ability to meet future load demand and to integrate renewables. So more needs to be done there. And also as a utility, we have to proceed with grid modernization efforts. Um, we're looking at putting in, they call them ADMS systems or DERM systems. So ADMS is automated distribution management system. So we're making a smarter grid. And a DERM system will allow the utility and the customer to interact on a two-way basis a little bit better so that we can help with, say, distributed resource deployments. We're doing right now a smart water heater controller program where we pay customers and then they allow us to curb their water heater heating just over the peak period. So we're working that out and learning a lot from that pilot program, but we think that's the beginning of a number of different programs that we can institute to sort of make sure that our grid has enough capacity for really peak events.
All right. So the question this all comes down to, I mean, not really, but I think the question that maybe the average listener might be asking at the end of all this: what advice would you give to someone who's currently on the fence about choosing an EV or not?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I think a car purchase is a very personal thing, and a lot of people bring in a lot of different factors: affordability, style, whether it's going to meet the range requirements that they have, whether they live in a rural community that's far from EV charging, or whether they live in an urban one where there's a lot of other alternatives, including transit and e-bikes, which are pretty cool and fun also. So there's a lot of considerations in making that an automobile purchase. And so I guess all I would suggest to people is try it out. You know, a lot of people know somebody now with an electric car. Ask them how they feel about it. Ask them about, have they had any problems visiting charging stations? Have they ever had a problem finding charging stations? How has it impacted their pocketbook? Um, and maybe borrow an EV or rent one or try one out, go on a test drive, and just make an informed decision by doing the research. And you know, it's fine if you choose not to buy an EV right now if it's not the right time for you. I suspect that there will be more models that'll come out, and they'll be better and better and better every year. This is still an area where electric vehicles have a lot of development that they could go through, and they can become a lot better and better. And then the incumbent technology, internal combustion engine vehicles, they've to some degree hit the pinnacle of their capabilities. And so, um, I really think this is the challenger's game to win over the years. And I'm an EV driver, and I absolutely love my EV, and I don't want to go back. Sometimes when I go on these conferences and speaking engagements around the country, I have to rent a car, and of course, they're almost always ICE vehicles, and so when I get in one, I'm kind of sad. But no judgment. If you're not ready for an EV yet, that's okay. We can still be friends.
That's good. That's good to hear, and I think, like you said, the technology is coming along. So, as time moves on, there may be vehicles or developments that start to help more and more people have their needs met with what's out there.
Yeah.
So there is speaking of advice, there's one thing that we really do like to do here as we close out every podcast, and that's to help our listeners get to know you better and also give them something nice to take away. So as we come in to dock the ship here, based on today's podcast, what advice would you like to give people out there? We give everyone the opportunity to just take the floor, and it doesn't have to be anything about what we talked about, but it can be just any good advice that you have in general that you'd like to share with the world.
Yeah, that's a tremendous opportunity. Thank you, Austin. Um, Okay, so I guess this is a little bit of career advice. This is free career advice to people. So I'll tell you this. So I started my career about 25 years ago, and I've worked for utilities pretty much my whole career. I've worked for gas utilities, natural gas utilities. I worked at a merchant gas and power company called Enron Corporation. You might have heard of them. And I've worked in the Northwest here for Puget Sound Energy, Seattle City Light, and Tacoma Power. So I've been around to a number of different companies and experienced a lot of what people can do within utilities. And I would say this, working for utility is great. It's really fun. Uh, Utilities do so many things. So there's a lot of versatility in what you can do when you work for utilities. I change my job pretty much every 5 years. And so I've done resource planning, I've worked in finance, I've worked just about everything you could do except I don't have an engineering degree, ironically. So anything without an engineering degree, I've just about I've done that. So um, I would say if you're looking for an interesting job where you get to give back to the community that you live in or live near, and you want to work on something interesting, utilities, especially energy utilities, are facing a dramatic change right now over the next decade. Probably will change more in the next decade than in any other decade except the first decade of electric power. I think that that much is going on here. And as a utility, we need your help. We need, it's a great job. If you can get into electrical engineering, then that's tremendous. You should do that and come work for a utility. It's great fun. It's you feel good at the end of the day because you're helping out your community. You never get bored. There's a million things to do here, and the industry is really rapidly changing and growing, and we need your creativity, and we need your cooperation, and we need your help and your smarts, and we need your education, and we need uh, your strong effort. So if you're looking for a great business to get into, um, I would strongly encourage you to look at working for your local electric utility.
Well, I'll tell you what, you opened my eyes today as someone who's I thought I was fairly familiar with Tacoma, and yet here I am learning new things about what you guys are doing and what you're involved with. So there is certainly lots there, and I've also heard from other people in the communications space with the different people I get to work with here at the organization that whether you're talking about Tacoma or you're talking about some of our small rural utilities, the challenges are the same. The solutions may be vastly different, but the challenges are definitely something that everyone is facing. And I know that there's also a lot of challenge, and people talk a lot behind the scenes about how hard it is right now to find good people to come in and fill those roles. And so I think you're absolutely spot on that we need as many creative minds and as many interesting people to come in, and the more the better.
Yeah, and if this podcast is going out soon, I think we have two positions that are open. So come take a look at our website and see if it's something that might be interesting to you. And if you're real curious, and you can catch me on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to chat with people there who are curious or interested about my comments or my wild personal opinions, and happy to chat with you.
Perfect. Well, there you go. And yeah, so yeah, LinkedIn, and I think I believe all of your employment stuff goes through City of Tacoma. So if people are looking for that, yeah, go. I know you can get there from the TPU site. I may or may not have browsed that a few times in my life over the years, but I know that you can get there through City of Tacoma. So if people are looking for those job postings, definitely head over there. But yeah, with that, thank you for making the time. Thanks for sharing all this. And I think yeah, today people are going to get a lot of great information out of this podcast and a lot to think about. So as always, it's another great episode of Damn.
Thank you for having me on, Austin. I really appreciate it. It's I get so much out of listening to podcasts and hearing about what other people do. This is just maybe my chance to give back a little bit. So I'm yeah, thankful for this opportunity. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, and whether it's you or anyone else listening, we got 8 other episodes out there right now. So this will be number 9. It'll be out in Well, it'll be out when people listen to it. For you, it'll be out in just a few weeks here, but for everyone else, you'll hear it when it comes out. So, yeah. And then as far as other things go, I was going to mention that episode 4 we have one dedicated to at least some of the forms of hydrogen that are out there. So, yeah, if people heard hydrogen today and they want to hear a little bit more, I can't say that we have the full expertise of all things hydrogen covered. I'm not sure. I mean, we might need another podcast that's not about hydropower for that one, but we've got at least a little bit more out there if people are interested in starting to dive into that topic.
Yeah, I'm on the I'm a part of the Renewable Hydrogen Alliance. So if you're interested in hydrogen, you can check out the Renewable Hydrogen Alliance website. Or I'm also on the Washington Green Hydrogen Alliance. That's a Washington specific one and a little bit more industry focused, but yeah, definitely you can find some good information there. And hopefully we'll hear sometime soon about the hydrogen hub application that the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Association put forward. And I'm really curious to hear if the Department of Energy is going to fund some of those projects. I think that's going to be really exciting for our region.
Definitely, and we're lovers of all hydros over here, so we accept them all. So, well, thanks. Like I said, thanks again, and yeah, I really appreciate the time today doing the podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks.
As you've probably gathered from the discussion you just heard, Cam is a real problem solver and an opportunity seeker. That shouldn't be too surprising, though, as that's sort of the nature of his role, and that's a role he excels in. What I did enjoy was getting to learn about Tacoma's impressive efforts and the ways they're setting an example for how utilities can carve out opportunities for electrification for all of their customers, from low-income families and individuals to a port that employs over 42,000 people and generates $3 billion, yes, with a B, in economic activity. It's also a good reminder of just how diverse the Northwest communities are and what challenges our different public power members face in serving those communities. And I'll wrap up by saying that I enjoyed just how passionate Cam was about solving these challenges and what a believer he really is in TPU and what they're bringing to the table. Also, as I mentioned, Episode 4 of Dam, titled Hydrogen, the Other Hydropower, with Gary Ivory of Douglas PUD, is a great place to further explore that technology. It's possible that down the line we may need to give hydrogen some more airtime in the future as well, since there are so many different forms and ways that it's being implemented. And yes, this is a hydropower podcast, but as I mentioned in the outro before we cut to the outro, we're fans of hydrogen as it is an important factor in making sure that we can make the clean energy transition that we so often talk about on this podcast and in everything we do here at Northwest River Partners. Now for the usual housekeeping, reviews. Leave positive ones on the listening platform you're currently using and you can help grow our audience. If you don't, that's okay too. I'll be slightly disappointed, but we'll try to do better, I guess. But for those that are enjoying this hydropower podcast, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications so you never miss new episodes when they arrive every other Friday. Last but certainly not least, visit us at nwriverpartners.org or check us out on social media at nwriverpartners until you hear from us next. With that, I'm out of here, so see ya!